So listen, Kaushik, can you talk to me a little bit about CRM and getting sales team to really embrace it, make the most of this tool, the process that's embedded in that tool? Because from what I've seen, sometimes salespeople, they don't always love CRM. They see it as a sales management tool. They see it as a distraction from spending time with customers. And they kind of like sometimes to be a little bit free in the way that they do things. And so sometimes they don't like that discipline. Your example showed how it can be very beneficial, but have you seen examples from industry where sales management had done a great job of bringing the sales team on board with new CRM processes or a new CRM system?
There are a few examples that I can share. So maybe I'll give you the broad general principle that I've seen that works. So yes, you're right. Sales, you put it mildly, sales people hate putting data on CRM unless it is useful to you and there's a lot of extra work. Don't like it. But CRM is important to bring in that data consistency and process consistency. Right? Now, the example that I gave earlier about a top manager enforcing, that works. But that's not the only lever that one should have. I have seen again and again across the customers that I have worked with that the first level sales managers, the FLSMs, they are the key. So when you are thinking through such a change, where you are changing sales organization, the structure, you are bringing in more process, you have to get your first level sales managers on board with you. And because you can give all the directions, but ultimately the data entry, the process adherence will always be at the lowest level, right? And the top manager is just too far away from there. So once you have got your FLSMs, and that you do through rewards, of course, but in terms of the KPIs. You see, the KPIs is a very key part because you can only improve what you measure. And ultimately, salespeople are, again, KPI driven.
Yeah.
You give them more money, they'll sell more. It's a universal truth that I've seen in the sales organizations I have worked with and the customers I've worked with, right? And that's why I like sales, because salespeople are very simple. You have to give more money, right? So that money piece has to be there. But the difference that I have seen in organizations who have been able to bring in those cultures along with these KPIs is kind of develop a mix of short-term as well as long-term KPIs. I'll give an example. Any organization, there is a sales pyramid, right? So there's this top, 10 to 20% of the customers who are bringing in 50 to 60% of the revenue. Then there is a middle segment which is bringing in probably about 30%, and then there is this huge base that is bringing in the rest, right? Now, each of these segments, you need to, treat them differently, because in the top segment, you are working with your biggest customers. You are trying to develop that long-term relationships, and you can't be thinking just quarter-wise. So if you are, and it's so embedded with the organizational culture that you may talk about all of this, but then during the forecast calls, if you pull up your, the first level sales manager on why they are not bringing in, a deal with a key account, which is of, X, let's say, and sacrificing it for a deal that they are cooking in Q3 and Q4, 2 or 3 quarters after, which could be 10x. So if you don't have that patience from an organizational culture point of view, then guess what your first level managers will do? They'll go and do that transaction. And the moment they do the transaction, they're jeopardizing that whole big deal, because the customer then gets focused on making sure that this investment is done well, right? So their focus on, making investment later on kind of reduces. So again and again, I have seen that if you're able to balance the short-term KPIs with long-term KPIs, that's something that is, that really helps.
And get the first line sales managers on board.
First line sales managers.
Yeah, they're your catalyst for this change. Yeah?
Absolutely, they are your champions. So you have to treat them as champions. You have to really, also, typically what happens, and that's again a culture thing, because as salesperson, I do well, and I do really well, and then I become a manager. But then just because I've become a manager doesn't mean that I'm a manager and a leader, right? A lot of first level managers still remain that salesperson. So investment has to be made in terms of changing their mindset. Getting them to think like leaders, not as salespersons. And that's another, there are companies who don't do that, but there are a lot of companies who still, the best salesperson becomes the sales manager and he remains the best salesperson. He has not become a sales leader. Do you relate to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that myself. Absolutely.